Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Campos, and I have the honor of serving as Chief of Staff to the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, to District Attorney Chesa Boudin. Let me begin first by wishing everyone a happy Black History Month as we honor the contributions of the Black community in this country. But welcome to today's, this is our monthly meeting, and I want to just remind people that the district attorney holds town halls every month, and this is our monthly town hall. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here and watching. We will be taking questions during this town hall, and we have received a number of pre-submitted questions, and we will be taking those questions first. But we also will be taking questions from the chat as people submit them. And we're going to hear directly from the DA. So let me begin by welcoming our district attorney. Welcome, DA Boudin.
Thank you so much, David. Great to be here with everyone. Thank you all for joining us. I'm excited to hear from our residents and to answer as many questions from San Francisco folks as possible today. So let's get into it.
Let's get into it. I do want to remind folks that you just gave the recent State of Justice address a few days back. So if you haven't seen it, make sure you watch that. But let's get into it. We want to get to as many questions as we can. So let's begin with the first question, DA. This is from Lily, who expresses concern about violence in the AAPI community. And she asks specifically what you will do to bring justice to the 84-year-old man who was senselessly killed walking down his neighborhood. This just happened a few days ago, and it's very hard to watch the video. She mentions that as a fellow Asian American, her community will not stand for acts of violence, and something must be done.
Well, thank you, Lily, for the question. It's absolutely a devastating crime. I just moments ago finished a meeting with the daughter and son-in-law of the victim. The pain was absolutely palpable in their voice. It was a very emotional meeting, and their loss is just unimaginable. This was a senseless and random act of violence, and it is one that I know has caused tremendous fear among many folks, particularly in the AAPI community. Everyone is feeling it. This was a horrible act. It was a senseless act, and we have taken very concrete, specific steps to ensure accountability and to send a message that is loud and clear to anyone who would commit similar crimes in the future. We filed murder charges, and we filed a detention motion seeking the pretrial detention of the man we believed committed this murder. That is the act that we have taken thus far, the steps that we have taken thus far, and we will absolutely continue to keep the community informed about how the case proceeds. I also want to clarify some misinformation that we've seen amidst the high emotions in this case. First of all, the individual that we charged with murder was never released from custody after his arrest. The San Francisco Police Department did a phenomenal job investigating this case. And from the moment they took him into custody, he has remained in custody. We have asked the court to order him detained pending trial. There's some miscommunication or misinformation saying he was arrested and released. That is false. The other thing I want to clarify is there is no evidence as we stand here today of what the motivation was. We don't know if this was a hate crime or if this was motivated by something else. It is senseless, it was brutal, it was violent, but we do not know what the motivation was as we stand here today. The investigation is ongoing, and we are working very closely with San Francisco Police to develop as much information about motive as we can. I promise we'll keep you informed, and we will take whatever steps necessary to ensure there is accountability and that no one thinks this kind of behavior is tolerated in San Francisco.
DA Boudin, we're getting a lot of questions about this subject. And in fact, there is a follow-up question that we're getting asked a lot, which is more generally about violence against the AAPI community. People want to know, what can we do to stop it?
Well, we know that in the past year, during the pandemic, with all of the xenophobia and racism that was being spewed out of the White House, we know that across the country and right here in San Francisco, there was an uptick in hate crimes, an uptick in discrimination and targeting of members of the AAPI community. It is unacceptable. We will not tolerate it. My office has a dedicated hate crimes assistant district attorney. She handles any rebooking we get from the police involving allegations of hate crimes. She's also been really proactive in the community, doing trainings and community activities to help raise awareness about hate crimes, what hate crimes are, how we can prevent them, how we can deter them, and to make sure everyone knows what steps to take if you are the victim or a witness to a hate crime. We've been in partnership with many Chinese community-based organizations and media outlets, constantly trying to raise awareness about the need to prevent, deter, and detect hateful activity. Earlier this week, I joined our mayor, Mayor London Breed, our police chief Bill Scott, at a press conference specifically to denounce recent violence against elders, against vulnerable members of the community, against AAPI community members. We will continue to do everything in our power to stand by and stand with the AAPI community, to work with our law enforcement partners to prevent violence and to hold those who commit violent acts accountable. It is my priority, and I am very excited to work closely with Chief Scott on this critical issue. I'm going to be meeting soon with my AAPI advisory board to get feedback and input from our community leaders and partners about what other things we can do as an office to better support and protect our community. I'm very open to other suggestions that come our way. I know that it's essential that people not just be safe, but that they also feel safe. And this recent violent crime has shattered that sense of safety for many. We will do whatever it takes to rebuild our sense of safety.
We're actually going to turn to the chat right now because there's a direct follow-up question to this issue. And this DA was sent by an anonymous attendee. And the question is, I have not yet heard any specific information as to why the family believes the horrible act was racially motivated. Can you clarify the basis of the claim that it was hate-induced?
Well, I appreciate the question. I don't know the answer. Again, we don't have any evidence as we stand here today that this was motivated by race or what we would otherwise call a hate crime. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are on heightened alert because of the racism and xenophobia that have been so prevalent, even from government in the last year. And there's always a question about what would motivate this kind of violence. We don't know the answer as we stand here today. And we are continuing to investigate in partnership with the police. I don't know why some people have assumed this was a hate-based crime. We know that the victim was Asian. We know that he was elderly. We know that he was vulnerable. We know that what happened was senseless, was brutal, and was absolutely unacceptable.
Actually, also related to this case, there was a question that we got from Michael, who referenced the crimes against the Asian American community and wanted to know about the Ratanapakdi case, the senseless crime against this 84-year-old man. And he says that he knows that Antoine Watson was charged with murder, but is asking about the woman who was also arrested and whether or not she has been charged.
Thank you, Michael, for that question. The woman has not been charged, and the reason is very simple. She was arrested as part of a comprehensive police investigation. The police took this case very seriously, as they should have, and they took every step to preserve evidence and to make sure that any person of interest was detained as part of their investigation. We do not currently have any evidence that this female was even aware a crime had been committed, much less that she played a role in the crime. If we get evidence that she participated or was involved, we will absolutely act accordingly and file relevant criminal charges. But we do not have that evidence. We did have evidence about Mr. Watson, and we did file as I said earlier, murder charges against Mr. Watson for what we believe he did and what we believe we can prove he did. Not every arrest leads to criminal charges. It is the job of the police, and they did their job here, to arrest those they suspect may be involved in a crime. It is their job to gather and preserve evidence and to present their investigation to my office. We then work in partnership with police investigators to determine if there is adequate evidence of a crime, and if so, what crime. In this case, as I said, it is an active investigation, and if we receive evidence that changes things, we will act accordingly. As we stand here today, there's no evidence that the female associate was involved in the crime, knew the crime occurred, or even witnessed it.
Thank you. We're going to go back to the pre-submitted questions, DA Boudin, and people asked about another very horrible crime, and that's the murder of Jack Palladino. We know that a lot of questions have been raised, and people want to know what charges the accused, the people who are accused of killing him, what charges they're facing. People also want to know what role did he play in actually solving his own case.
Yes, thank you for the question. And again, let me just express my condolences to the family. I know they are going through a tremendously difficult tragedy. The loss is jarring, unexpected, unacceptable, and unthinkable. Mr. Palladino was a heroic investigator. He was smart, he was insightful, he was dedicated to his clients. And his loss has been felt by many, not just his family, but by many in the San Francisco community and beyond. As we understand the facts today, Mr. Palladino was outside his house with a camera that he was using for investigation work, and two people evidently tried to rob him of that valuable camera. The camera was around his neck, and as we understand the facts, they tried to grab it, and in the process, dragged him approximately 40 feet while the camera was around his neck. It pulled him. Eventually, they let go of the camera strap, and Mr. Palladino fell to the ground, hitting his head. Mr. Palladino had, shortly before this occurred, taken photos on his camera of this car. And the photos were preserved on the camera. The police were able to access the camera to see the photos. And we believe his photos show the exact same car driven by his assailants, in which one of the assailants was later arrested by the San Francisco police. And we hope to be able to use that photo as evidence in his case. We believe he played a role, in some ways poetically played a role as an investigator in solving his own murder. It's a tragedy. The investigation is still ongoing. We have already charged both men that we believe were involved in this brutal crime with a wide range of felony charges. At the time we filed charges, Mr. Palladino was still alive on life support. So we filed attempted murder as the most serious charge. Since then, he has passed away, and we have informed the defense and the court of our intention to amend the charges to a murder charge.
We received a question from Charlie, who wanted to know the status of another case, and this is a case against the person that's accused of killing young Jace Young in the Bayview. And Charlie wants to know if the suspect is in jail, in custody, and he expressed a desire for justice for that family. Can you comment on that?
Thank you, Charlie. This was an absolutely shocking and devastating loss of a 6-year-old child on the 4th of July. It was a drive-by shooting, and it appears that 6-year-old Jace Young was an innocent bystander who caught a stray bullet, and that bullet took his life. The San Francisco police worked on the case. I met myself with the family, with Mr. Young's, Jace Young's mother and father. I've spoken with them numerous times. Our victim advocates have been very proactive at providing support to the family. I want to commend both the investigative work of the police department as well as the advocacy of my victim services team in doing everything possible to support the family. We are prosecuting the case. We filed a murder charge against one of the individuals we believe to have been involved. Another suspect is a juvenile, so I cannot share information publicly about what's happening in the juvenile case. The adult is in jail. We have asked for his detention with no bail, and his case is currently scheduled for a preliminary hearing. We hope to move the case forward as quickly as possible. We continue to stand by and support the victim's family, Jace Young's family. He has a very strong, loving family. I know this tragedy has brought them together and has also torn them and an entire community apart. So thank you, Charlie, for the question, for caring about an innocent life unnecessarily lost to gun violence. We are working as hard and as fast as we can to achieve justice. And I know that no matter what the outcome of these cases is, nothing we do will bring Jace Young back.
We're going to go back to the chat, and this is a question that's from Jeremy in the chat. What can be done about the drug crisis in the Tenderloin? Thanks for the question. It's such a ongoing and kind of constant emergency in this city. It's not a new one, but I know in 2020 it's gotten worse in many ways. The level of desperation and isolation and economic despair that we've seen in 2020 is really unprecedented. And overdoses are on the rise, fatal overdoses. We actually have more people in San Francisco this year, 2020, who died of drug overdoses than died from COVID-19. And we know that COVID-19 is contributing to that. It's forcing people who have substance dependence to use dangerous drugs in private or in isolation in places where help can't arrive in time to reverse the overdoses and save their lives. I think we need a three-part approach to trying to solve the drug epidemic. First of all, we need a public health approach, and I think that should be divided into two separate steps. We need safe consumption sites. People do not die of overdoses in safe consumption sites. I want to commend my Chief of Staff, David Campos. When he was on the Board of Supervisors years ago, he had the foresight to recognize the need for safe consumption sites and to propose legislation that would have created them. People do not die of overdoses in safe consumption sites, and we need them now. Safe consumption sites also allow us to provide treatment and services, harm reduction approaches. We can engage with folks who have substance use problems in safe consumption sites, and we can provide treatment on demand. That's the second part here. It needs to be easier to get help than it is to get high in San Francisco, and that is not the case today. People who want help don't know where to find it. We've seen news reports this week about how long it takes the city to open up detox centers and to open up beds for people who have substance disorders and mental health disorders. We need to provide that kind of outlet for people who want help to get it. And then the third part is really the part where our office comes in, and that's law enforcement. We need to be more effective than we are. There's no question about it. Look, San Francisco police are out there arresting as many people as they can on the streets in the Tenderloin. They're bringing us hundreds of cases, and we're filing them. We have filing rates in our drug sales cases that are well above 70%. We also have so many open drug sale and possession for sale cases that it is the single largest category of crime that my office has in felonies. Any felony, drugs, possession for sale and sale are the #1 category of crime we prosecute. That's not my first choice. I want a public health approach. I want the city to help us prevent the demand for drugs in the first place. I want to attack the demand side by getting people treatment, getting them off the street and on their feet. And on the supply side, rather than just focusing on low-level dealers who are replaced immediately by other people selling the same toxic poison, I want to work with our law enforcement partners in San Francisco, in the East Bay and beyond, to work upstream and make some big busts that really disrupt the supply chain. We don't have enough of those cases, and we've seen through decades of the failed war on drugs that simply arresting street-level dealers, low-level folks with a couple grams, yes, absolutely enough to result in a fatal overdose, but not enough
for us to meaningfully change access to dangerous drugs. We've got to do a better job on the supply side, working our way upstream, attacking the source of the drugs in partnership with other agencies. And we've got to have a public health approach to get people off these dangerous drugs.
District Attorney, we're going to continue with the chat, and there's another question, and this is from Jerry, but it's a different Jeremy. It's not the same Jeremy. And his question is, what changes have you made in your office after the senseless murder of Hanako Abe and Elizabeth Platt?
Thank you for the question, Jeremy. For folks who aren't familiar, just a bit of background and context. On New Year's Eve, a tragic drunk driving or driving under the influence incident resulted in the death of two women, Hanako Abe and Elizabeth Platt. The man we believe is responsible for those deaths is named Troy McAllister. We have charged him with their deaths. We've charged him with a wide range of felony offenses. We have asked the court to hold him without bail. And there were a lot of questions raised about his arrest and about why this tragedy occurred. It forced my office and many other agencies to take a long, hard look at decisions we made in Mr. McAllister's case, and also at how we communicate and partner with other law enforcement agencies. Many of you may be aware, Mr. McAllister was on parole supervision at the time of this incident. He also had been arrested multiple times in the past year. And in each of those prior arrests, my office referred the case to parole. We have to be able to rely on and work with our law enforcement partners. We have to be able to communicate effectively with our law enforcement partners, and they have to be able to rely on and communicate with us. And every single one of us who touched this case, everybody in my office who looked at Mr. McAllister's arrest, everybody I know in other agencies that were involved wishes they had done something that might have prevented this devastating double vehicular homicide. All of us do. I lay awake at night thinking about what I could have done, what my staff could have done. I met with the families of both of those young women, and those meetings were among the hardest meetings I've ever had to sit through. The loss on their face, the suffering, it's unthinkable, and nothing we do will bring them back. There were difficult questions that their families asked us, and we don't have good answers. We don't have good answers. What I can tell you is that going forward, we've already met with all of our partner law enforcement agency leaders. We've sat down, we've discussed improving communication, improving the kinds of procedures that will prevent someone like Mr. McAllister from slipping through the cracks in the future. We have a lot of work to do. We are in the process of drafting a memorandum of understanding that would lay out the specific responsibilities and expectations when someone is on supervision, like parole or probation, and how those sorts of cases will be handled. I want to be clear, not every arrest provides us with enough evidence to prove a new conviction. And in many instances, having someone on probation or parole is a very effective way for us to work with other law enforcement experts to supervise and support and intervene when someone is on a downward spiral. It does not work 100% of the time. We know that recidivism in our criminal justice system is a tragic reality. It's not unique to San Francisco. It's not unique to 2020. About 2/3 of people coming home from state prison across the state of California will be re-incarcerated within a couple years of their release. We need to do a better job breaking that cycle. We need to intervene and address root causes of crime in ways that prevent these kinds of tragedies from recurring.
We're trying to have a good mix of pre-submitted questions and questions from the chat. So we're going to go back to the pre-submitted questions, DA. And speaking of incarceration, we have a question from Maria. And she asked, what is the DA's office doing to challenge the mass incarceration directives that have been used in the past to target minorities?
Thank you, Maria, for the question. You know, as many of you remember, I campaigned on a platform that was focused on ending mass incarceration and changing the way that we approach crime so that incarceration is not the first resort in every case. We know it's not effective. We know that people who've been incarcerated often end up reoffending and reincarcerated. As we've discussed tonight, there are many instances where incarceration is our only option, at least in the short term, to keep the public safe. As I mentioned in the murders and homicides that we discussed tonight, my office has sought detention because we believe that is the only way in the short term, at least, to keep the public safe. But in the vast majority of cases where people are arrested, where people cycle through the revolving door of jail and emergency rooms and incarceration and homelessness, we need to have more effective tools to get at the root causes of crime. We cannot simply lock every single person up forever that has contact with the police. It's unconstitutional. We don't have the resources to do it, and it would be unethical. We need more effective tools, and we need to make sure that every arrest is an opportunity for intervention and transforming lives away from crime, not simply for incarcerating people as long as the law allows. We tried that old approach. We've seen it play out in every corner of the state and the country, and it has not worked to keep us safe. The vast majority of people, no matter what policies I put in place, no matter who the district attorney is, the vast majority of people who are arrested by the police will be released from custody at some point. And we need to make sure that while they're incarcerated, whether it's for a day or a week or a month or for a decade, that while they are incarcerated, we are intervening in ways that are effective, that are humane, and that get at what motivated their behavior. So that when they are released, if they are released, as the vast majority will be, we are all safer, that they will not reoffend, that they are reintegrated into their communities with the supports and supervision, whether it be parole or probation or what have you, the supervision necessary to prevent recidivism. That's how we build long-term safety. That's how we ensure that police work resulting in arrests turns into opportunities for transforming lives away from crime.
Now, next, we're going to go back to the chat, and this is actually a question that I've heard different people ask in different ways, but it's a little long, but this is the question from Robin, and thank you, Robin, for asking it. And she says, it seems that Prop 47 is a problem in allowing crimes up to $950 worth to be charged as a misdemeanor. Doesn't this law hinder your office in being able to charge to stop people from committing these crimes because you have to charge as a misdemeanor? And specifically, stores are being raided and looted, but people who are visibly taking merchandise, the only stores that can protect themselves, like Walgreens, are actually hiring police at times and a half, which is expensive for stores, and many stores can't afford to do that. So the question is, how are stores supposed to survive if people can just come in, loot them with no consequences, no arrests?
Well, thank you for the question. It's definitely a major issue of concern to small businesses in San Francisco and to all of us who want to live in neighborhoods where we have stores and we have small businesses that we can go to when we have, want to fulfill a prescription or, pick up Pampers for our baby. And I know that Walgreens and other stores have been under tremendous pressure this year in particular. Part of it is that they're among the few stores that have stayed open. So many other stores that used to be targeted for shoplifting closed, and a lot of folks who are engaged in this kind of criminal conduct are now focusing their efforts on the few stores that are open. To the question about Prop 47, I don't think that that is really the issue, and I want to explain why. We can and do still prosecute shoplifting or other theft every day. I want to be really clear. When police make arrests and bring us provable investigations, we regularly file criminal charges or take other action to hold people who commit these crimes accountable. We do it every day. My office, the San Francisco District Attorney's Office, since I assumed my role in January of 2020, has filed more than 4,500 new adult criminal cases. Despite COVID, despite court closures, on top of the more than 5,000 cases I inherited when I took office, We have filed more than 4,500 new cases, everything from shoplifting at Walgreens to armed robbery, to burglaries, to murder. We will continue to take action and to hold people accountable when they commit these crimes. And lest people think that it's not a crime if it's not a felony, I want to be very clear. Misdemeanors are crimes. Having a misdemeanor criminal record can have serious life-altering consequences. We can put people on probation. We can put people in jail. We can require any wide variety of programming or anger management or drug counseling or any number of other things for people who are accused of misdemeanors. There are a wide array of interventions, both available to my office and to the courts when people are accused of misdemeanors. The challenge is, of course, we need to deter this behavior. We need to make sure that there is less of it. And we need to empower the San Francisco Police Department to focus their energy on responding to crimes in progress so that people don't believe they're going to get away with it. I know that responding to misdemeanor theft cases is a challenge in any jurisdiction in the country. And we need to work with our law enforcement partners and with our small business owners and with Walgreens and other chain stores to increase the deterrence and increase the prevention and increase the ways in which we work together to prevent these crimes from occurring. And when they do occur, to ensure that police are able to successfully investigate and bring us cases to file.
We're going to go back to a pre-submitted question, DA, and this comes from Nube, and I apologize if I mispronounced the name, but this is the question. How and when do we start shifting unnecessary police responses to the more appropriate community organization response? And Nube goes on to say that, you know, police don't really prevent crime. They arrive after a crime has been committed. And there are actually many organizations that have boots on the ground that could actually be used better for the purpose of working with people, serving communities, to empower them, uplift them, and you focusing on more healing and beneficial responses. So again, shifting the focus from a police response to a community-based organization response.
Thank you for the question, Nube. I'm a big proponent of focusing police resources on the kinds of activity that police are uniquely positioned to respond to, and making sure that we're not distracting police with other kinds of incidents. To give you a piece of data from 2019, for example, police in San Francisco responded to approximately 1 million calls for service. Of those, only about 5% were violent crimes in progress, right? So it tells us what police time is being dedicated to. And I know from talking to Chief Scott that he would love to increase his team's ability to respond quickly, especially to violent crimes, but to any crime in progress. And we know that police are often responding to overdoses or to mental health crises or to tent encampments. There's a model that I'm a big fan of. It's called Cahoots. It's in Eugene, Oregon. And the way it works is when someone calls 911 to report an emergency, the 911 operator asks basic questions about the nature of the emergency. What's happening? Is there a weapon? Is someone injured? And depending on the details, the 911 operators are trained to dispatch either police, if it's a violent crime in progress, for example, to dispatch fire if it needs a paramedic or if there's a fire type emergency, or to dispatch a team of crisis intervention specialists, case managers, social workers, mental health professionals who have the training, the resources, the knowledge to help prevent an overdose from becoming fatal, or to help get someone off the street and into a shelter, even if it's the middle of the night. I know that San Francisco has begun a process of trying to build out teams, crisis intervention teams, like the ones in the Cahoots program in Eugene, Oregon. We have a couple of those teams that have been piloted so far in San Francisco, and I would absolutely love to see those teams succeed and expand so that they're citywide, 24/7, It, I think, can help avoid some of the kind of violence that occurs, some of the danger that occurs when we have an armed response to mental health crises, and also to free up police resources to focus on response time to crimes in progress. And that's going to help with everything from Walgreens, the sort of brazen Walgreens thefts, to shootings and homicides. So I'm a big proponent of that. I want to be clear, though, I don't have any power over police resources or police policy decisions. I work very closely with Police Chief Scott. We have a really productive working relationship. But when it comes to budget and allocation of resources, it's really up to the city. It's up to the mayor, the board of supervisors. I know they're doing work in this space, and I would love it if you join me in encouraging the work and urging them to do more faster to build out this model, so police aren't the first line of response to our public health crisis.
Well, perfect timing, and this is something that I've done a lot of work on with you, DA Boudin, but I want to thank Danny for asking it. So going back to the chat, this is Danny's question. I've heard you say that your office is seriously underfunded. Can you tell us what exactly, what extra funding would allow you to do? What would you do with extra funding?
Well, thanks for the question, Danny. Look, there's so much work that our office could do and needs to do. Part of it is making sure that we're doing our best work in every case. And I want to just, for point of comparison, I want to give you a sense of baseline. In 2018, 2019, 2020, the years before I took office, the office had a budget that allowed us to have 295 full-time employees. In other words, we were funded in order to pay full-time staff, 295 people to do the work. Everything from victim services to the lawyers who go to court and argue a motion to detain in a homicide. Now, our full-time employee budget is substantially lower than that. As things currently stand, we're only budgeted to have somewhere around 284 full-time employees. It's frustrating for me as a department head, particularly during a crisis like COVID, where we have so many limitations on who can come into the office, and when there's so much extra work being generated by the need to transition to electronic hearings, and when caseloads are growing because of court closures, to have a decrease in our budgeted staff. It spreads the people thin that we do have. It puts stress on folks and leads some folks to look for other jobs where they have more manageable caseloads. I know that my lawyers and my paralegals and my investigators and my victim witness advocates have tremendously high standards. They want to do their jobs to the best of their ability. They want to do them to a high standard. They want to do them with integrity and with pride. And San Francisco deserves as much. But when caseloads for our misdemeanor team, for example, go from 150 a year or so ago to 250 today, it's really hard, even for the hardest working, most dedicated lawyer, to keep up with that volume of work. So I want to be clear about what I'm asking for. I'm not looking to grow the footprint of our office. I'm looking to keep pace with our caseloads, with the tremendous volume of body-worn camera and surveillance video that didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago, right? Every single case, now we've got to review the footage. It's a critical part of what we do. We need to understand the evidence, the strength, the weaknesses. We need to prepare for every hearing, and we need to share that information with the court and the defense. But we can't spend the hours it takes to review body-worn camera footage and surveillance footage in every case when the caseloads are going up, when the number of people we have available to come into the office, given COVID limitations, is going down. So the areas in which, and we are going to have a public hearing on this, by the way, on our budget. I think it's a week from tomorrow, if I remember correctly. But we'll announce that, and we encourage folks to come and ask more questions about the budget. We are putting together a budget proposal, and the highlights I anticipate will be the following. We're going to ask the city to fully fund us for the same number of full-time employees that we had when I took office, that 295 full-time employee staffing level. And we're going to ask the city to provide us with additional resources, not so much for staffing, but for victim resources. We want to be able to help support victims and witnesses of crime. We want to do more for people who are suffering. And we want to do it regardless of whether there's a completed police investigation or prosecution. We want to be there for every single member of our community, small business, homeowner, resident, anyone who may be a victim of crime needs and deserves our help, and we want the resources to help you. So that's what we're going to be asking the city for. We're going to expand, for example, or ask to expand the District 5 pilot project we started with Supervisor Dean Preston that allows small businesses that have suffered from vandalism or broken windows during the pandemic to submit claims for reimbursement of insurance deductibles. We'd love to take that project, that victim services project, citywide, and to expand other areas where we are doing our victim advocacy work.
Well, stay tuned, everyone, and we'll give you more information about that. Thank you, DA. We're going to go back to the chat, and now Roger is asking this question, and I want to make sure that I get it right, so I'm going to read it. What actions can labor, faith-based, and community-based organizations and individuals take to support your office's reopening cases against law enforcement officers who were not prosecuted for unjustified killings and other crimes for which there is no statute of limitations? And then he writes, good luck in your efforts to make changes in a bloated, racist, and inhumane criminal justice system. That's
well, thank you for your support. There are real challenges. I inherited real challenges. We know that the racism and white supremacy that was on full display on January 6th in the Capitol building in Washington also exists in San Francisco and also has deep roots in every institution, certainly in our criminal courts, but also in education and housing, in employment opportunities. And we know that the racism and discrimination, the legacy of slavery, that creates so many obstacles for so many folks in our communities, especially Black and Brown communities, continues to funnel people into the criminal justice system, continues to shape incarceration rates and outcomes in criminal justice interventions in every jurisdiction in the country. And we are working hard to do better. Black History Month, as David said, is a really important reminder of how much work we have to do and of the legacy of policing and incarceration and slavery in this country. It's something that I know I and all of my staff take very seriously, and stay tuned for some announcements in the month ahead about some new policies we hope to implement in honor of Black History Month. To the heart of your question about police accountability, we have already made a number of really historic decisions around police accountability and around transparency. Now, let me give you a few examples. We filed 3 separate criminal cases at the end of last year against San Francisco Police Department officers for use of force against young men of color, in all cases, young men who were unarmed. And we also filed, one of those cases was the first ever homicide charges to be filed against a San Francisco Police Department officer for an on-duty killing. That's a huge step. There were huge obstacles. There was tremendous resistance. Much of the negativity, the dishonesty, the attacks that some of you see on social media and even in other areas of media are a result of our decision to do something difficult, something historic, something unprecedented, right? To try and hold officers we believed had committed a crime accountable. In one of those cases, a grand jury looked at the evidence and returned an indictment based on the evidence. A jury of your peers, of our peers, reviewed the evidence and decided that yes, a felony had been committed, multiple felonies by the officer. A lot of folks don't like those decisions. A lot of folks want to see impunity for police officers continue. That's not acceptable. We know that most police officers do their job with pride, with dignity, that they have a difficult and often an impossible job. And we also know that some officers sometimes commit crimes. And when they do, we will enforce the law equally. But to your question about old cases, about going back in time, it is extremely challenging to recreate investigations after the fact. We have folks looking at some of the older cases, some of the high-profile officer-involved shootings from 4 or 5 years ago, but it has been extremely challenging to try and recreate an investigation, find witnesses, or get statements from people that are fresh and accurate years after the fact. So I want to be honest with folks. This is something that is a priority to me. It is a priority to my office, both because of the families and the communities that are suffering from police use of force, and also because I know there are officers out there who used force lawfully under stressful situations who deserve to know the outcome of an investigation that has been hanging over them and causing stress and anxiety to them. So I expect that in the coming weeks, we will make some announcements about cases where we have done our best to investigate and to shed light on what happened, and where we have not found sufficient evidence that a crime was committed or that we can prove a crime was committed. And we will make those announcements as soon as we've fully completed our investigations. And we will continue to investigate other cases. And we will do what the law and the evidence allows us to do in those cases. We will continue to enforce the law equally, regardless of race, regardless of wealth, and regardless of what job title someone has or what union they're a member of.
DA, thank you for making that clarification that we're calling the cases as we see them, and sometimes we charge, but we also exonerate officers. I think that was an important point. But going back to the chat, we have a question from Jack. And he notes that in the news, it was reported that another Beta retail location, another location in Hayes Valley will be closed because the store was robbed at gunpoint. And in the report, I guess the CEO states that he's closing the store indefinitely because he's not willing to put his employees at risk. He states that, I guess their company Beta has stores around the globe, and that the crime in San Francisco is unlike anything he sees anywhere else. I guess the CEO says this actually doesn't happen anywhere else. And so the question is, why do you think crime is so much higher here than other cities?
Well, I appreciate the question. I know a lot of folks feel that crime is higher in San Francisco, and anyone who has been a victim of crime, especially an armed robbery, would understandably feel that crime is on the rise. I know certain stores that are still open during the pandemic have been hit particularly hard. It's also important to remember the data, and it's important for us as policymakers to look at data and to respond to the data. The San Francisco Police Department has a crime dashboard where they keep track of and report all reported crime. And what that dashboard shows is that robbery, the kind of crime described in the question, is actually down by about 25% since the beginning of 2020. It's a huge decline in robberies. Now, obviously, if your store has been robbed multiple times, then there's no reason you'd feel that or experience that. And the fact that it's down across the board doesn't mean much to you. I get it. But it's important to remember that, again, robbery, as reported to the police, is down by historic margins. We also are filing robbery charges in every case where we have enough evidence to prove a robbery. I don't know the specifics of that case. I don't know if police have identified the suspects and presented the case to us, but I would encourage you to report crime when it occurs to police. That way we have accurate data about how much crime is occurring, and that way the police can do their job. And I know they're working hard to investigate every crime, especially crimes like armed robbery, violent crimes. And when they present us with investigations that allow us to prove a case, we file charges. In some instances, we'll ask the police for more evidence. We'll tell them we want to file the case, but we need them to get DNA evidence or to bring us additional video footage. And we work closely with the police in that process every day. We've got a team of lawyers in my intake unit who between them have well over 100 years of criminal legal practice experience. And they know what they're doing. And they make difficult decisions in hundreds of cases a week. Most of those cases, most of those decisions will never come to public light or scrutiny. But every day they're looking at evidence police have brought them and deciding that, yes, we can prove a case and we're going to file charges. Or, no, we don't have enough and we're not going to file the case, but we're going to tell the police what we need for next time. so that we can file it, or that we're going to refer the case to another jurisdiction, parole or probation or a different county that may have more leverage. That's what we do all day, every day. And it's important that folks be aware it's only the high profile tragedies, the outliers, that end up being subject to the kind of scrutiny we've seen in 2021. Send me a incident report number for the case you're referring to. If you have a question about a particular case, send me the incident report number, send it to my office. We can put the email address in the chat, and we will look into it. We will follow up, and we will get back to you about what action we took, why we took that action, about what else we needed from the police, or what the thought process was. But I assure you, we are taking these cases seriously. We are filing charges. As I said earlier, since I took office, we have filed more than 4,500 new adult criminal cases. That doesn't even include our neighborhood courts. That doesn't even include our juvenile courts. My team is working as hard as they can, and I know the San Francisco police are as well.
Just so that people know, the email where you can send your questions or if there's a specific case is districtattorney@sfgov.org, districtattorney@sfgov.org. We have another question in the chat, DA. This is from an anonymous attendee who writes, I appreciate your understanding of the impacts of drug abuse and looking to public health to assist in resolving this problem. Have you noted any success in attempts to holistically address drug abuse and avoid the crime statistics and recidivism?
Well, yes, I mean, absolutely. I think we have a drug court that I wish I could take credit for. It's existed for a number of years before I took office. It's a court that allows us to pair people charged with usually nonviolent crimes and lower level felonies with a case manager and a treatment plan. And their progress is monitored by my assistant district attorneys and by a judge. That court has tremendous success. It's slow, it's long. The path to sobriety is often an uneven path with pitfalls and potholes. And we know that some of the people we refer to that court do not succeed. Some of them relapse, some of them get arrested with new cases, and others every year graduate. And graduating is a rigorous process. It takes time. It takes a commitment to sobriety, to reducing dependence on dangerous drugs. It takes a commitment to following the law and engaging with a treatment plan. I've personally attended and participated in a number of our drug court and other collaborative court graduations. We have a young adult court. We have a veterans justice court. We have a community justice court. And those courts are really doing phenomenal work. They are understanding and identifying the root causes of crime. They're providing people with supervision and with support in the context of an existing criminal case. And when folks change their lives and demonstrate that they can sustain that change, they get to graduate from the court. And it's a really moving thing to see. As I said, I've been really honored to participate in some of those ceremonies. And I know that many of the graduates have gone on to live not only crime-free lives, but tremendously productive lives. It's not the kind of thing, the kind of story that ever gets written up in the headlines. It's not the kind of thing you're going to read about on social media, but it's happening every day. And I want to give credit where credit is due to our partners in the Department of Public Health, to our partners in the courts, and of course to my staff who work in our collaborative courts to identify root causes of crime, to give people opportunities and structure that allow them to transform their lives and leave crime behind and begin contributing to their communities.
Yeah, we're nearing the end of the hour. Time flies. We're going to take a question from Jason here in the chat. Thank you to you and your office for hosting this town hall. It seems that the city, the state lack adequate rehab facilities as an alternative to incarceration. Do you believe we should construct new rehab facilities that also provide job skills, training, mental health services, and alternatives to incarceration? And if so, how can we use this roadmap as a pitch to secure adequate state and federal funds in the forthcoming infrastructure bill?
Short answer, yes. Absolutely, 100% agree. We need those things. We need more of them. We need a lot more of them. The county jail right now is the #1 provider of mental health services in the city. 75% of the people police bring to county jail are drug addicted, mentally ill, or both. We must have treatment on demand. We must have community-based interventions. Remember, by the time police make an arrest and bring someone to jail and we have enough evidence to charge someone with a serious crime, the damage has been done. Someone has been harmed. Someone has been victimized. We must intervene upstream. We must prevent these crimes from occurring. And we can't only rely on police to do that. We must have a public health approach. We must have more capacity in our treatment facilities, in our homeless shelters, in our harm reduction teams. And right now that capacity is simply not there. I am absolutely all for working with our local resources, our state resources, and whatever federal resources we can get to ensure that we have enough capacity to meet the demand in San Francisco. People should not be on the streets dying of overdoses. It is unacceptable. It is a disgrace. It is unsafe, and it reflects badly on all of us.
DA, we're going to end with a final question from the chat, and this shouldn't be too difficult. We'll make it easy for you, but this is also from an anonymous attendee who wants to know, how can we find out about future town halls and other meetings you host?
Well, I definitely appreciate that question. A great one to end on. Thank you. We do our best to advertise them, usually on my Instagram account, on my Twitter account, and also to our email lists. So there's a number of ways you can do it. One is you can send us an email at the email address that was put in the chat earlier, I believe. Let us know you want to be added to our email list, and we'll keep you informed that way. Also, feel free to follow me on Instagram and Twitter. We always try to announce a few days in advance when we are going to be hosting a town hall. We do them once a month. Also, feel free to check out our Facebook Live every Wednesday at noon. And we record these events and post them after the fact. So if you're unable to watch live, you can always watch after the fact. Also, we have a podcast where we dive in a little bit deeper on some of the policy issues with experts from around the country in a range of different subject areas. It's called Chasing Justice. We completed season 1 last year, and we're getting ready to launch season 2 in the next month or two. So please stay tuned, subscribe, follow us, and hope to see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, DA, for your answers, and we want to thank all the members of the public, all of the residents of San Francisco who participated. We tried to get to all of your questions, but as the DA said, if for some reason we didn't get to your question, please email us, districtattorney@sfgov.org, districtattorney@sfgov.org. Happy Black History Month, everyone. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned for our Facebook Live in the next town hall. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you so much.